All right, Shea Degan, thanks for joining us on the Gentleman Badass podcast. How you doing today?
Good.
Good.
Thanks for the invite, boys.
We are here in your beautiful facility, 88 Tactical here in the Alpha Room recording today. So, I don't know much about you. Let's just start there. Can you give us a little background on your early life, going, time as a kid, time in school, how that looked?
Tell us about your childhood.
Yeah. Well, I just turned 27 last week,
All right.
so I'm near 30. Born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. One of three kids. I am the middle child, the good one out of the group. Older brother, very, very smart. Younger sister, very smart. I got the brains of a fucking dipshit. So went to Millard public schools, and then parents realized that my academics were absolutely freaking defunct and sent me off to prep, hoping that might straighten me out and make me a little bit smarter. So went to prep and got C's, just barely passed, basically, because for me at the time it was more important to make friends and
Networking.
And see, that's funny because that's exactly what it has become. Right back then, it's you're just a clown, you're a class clown, you just want to fuck around with your friends and have fun and not do well in school. But later on in life, I've recognized that that's networking. That's an important thing to do, and it's been extremely important in my professional career with the business. So ended up finishing up at prep. So my mom, she worked through Creighton Pediatrics, and so you could either take, you could get free tuition for your kids, or you could take a pay raise, right? So she opted for the free tuition. So my elder brother went to Creighton, graduated like magna cum laude. The guy's fucking brilliant. And then it was my turn. So they take a look at my transcripts.
I'll take the pay raise with this one.
Yeah, she's like, can I change it mid-flow? Is that possible? So so Creighton gets a hold of my grades from prep, and they're like, yeah, I think we'll pass on this one, right? So they didn't allow me to Creighton University. So I ended up going to UNO. My parents are like, hey, listen, we'll pay for 4 years of UNO. We'll pay out of our pocket, but it's got to be consecutive. Right. The moment you break in there, you're on your own. You're going to pay. So it's like, all right, that's fine. First semester, I blow off my finals or the midterms, right? Because I just hated school. I didn't want to be in school. I was always thinking of what I was going to do, outside of school. I was the kind of kid that if I got like a model car, I didn't read the instructions, right? And how to put it. I was like, yeah. Just throw that shit off to the side. And I'm like, when I got done, the engine block is on the hood, but I'm like, it looks good to me. It's beautiful, right? But I did it on my own, right? Yeah, exactly. So I ended up skipping out of my midterms, and then the finals came around. At the time, they told me, they said, we're going to put you on academic probation, right? So the next semester, I did the same shit, and I don't show up for my finals. And when I don't show up for the finals, now they put me on suspension for a year. So I'm suspended for a year, but I don't know how I'm going to tell my freaking parents. So this is back when they had the tear off the tab, right? And you peel it back, and the outside layer is like that carbon paper. And I had a typewriter. This is completely dating me. So I break out the typewriter, and I'm panicked. I had snatched my grades when they came in the mailbox before my parents got it. And so I recognize that an eraser will erase the grades. And it's the same font. I put it back in the typewriter, and I don't put A's because they would be completely on to me, right? Even B's and C's. So I put some C's in there. I put one B. I think that was in like gymnastics or basket weaving, and then I put a couple D's and one F, right? But it still looked better than what my other grades had been in the past. So I packed it up. I act like I even do the fake, like I just tore off the tab, and I give it to Mom. I go, oh, this is gonna be good. I just got my grades. And she goes, oh, let's see here. Peels back. She goes, oh, I'm so proud of you, honey. Look at your grades. You've done so well. And I'm like, hey, I've been thinking, I think I'm going to join the military and just go someplace for a year. It's just like, why would you do that? You're doing so well.
You're doing so well.
You're doing so well, honey. Look at you. You're going places. So at that time, I was like, fuck, I got to find something to do, right? Complete deadbeat. So it was either the Marine Corps, and everybody's going to laugh their ass off, or the Coast Guard. And at the time, it was like right when Top Gun came out. It just shows you how simple-minded and young I was at the time. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. It's a Navy. And I see him, these riding this ninja motorcycle. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do
keep in mind, for people listening, we are in Omaha, Nebraska. So we are the furthest fucking place you can be away from an ocean.
Hey, there are lakes
and
around
this
here
guy
in the river.
decides, the Coast Guard, because I see them all the time.
We have an icebreaker on the Missouri, for God's sakes. So I ended up joining the Coast Guard and went in on the buddy system with a friend, and it was a really cool experience. It was a lot of fun, and that's what kind of got me into law enforcement. That's really piqued my interest.
Okay.
So
yeah, I was going to ask about that too. That's the early life, and I had heard, number one, that you were a police officer, and number two, that you were a comedian. So we're going to have to cover both of those today at some point. But you mentioned police officer.
Yeah, so. the comic side really obviously went very well, as you can tell. Yeah, I was very successful at that. So the Coast Guard, I went through what they called port security school, so law enforcement and firefighting school, and that's the bug that bit me. And then I was like, man, this is it. I want to get into law enforcement. At the time, I was like, I have no idea what the fuck I want to do. So started testing for law enforcement agencies. Well, no, let me back up. So I liked the idea of going into law enforcement, but at the time, I was still pretty young, right? You got to be 21. Mm-hmm. And I was still wanted to be a jackass and just run amok and just kind of do my own thing. So I ended up doing some open mic nights down in Lincoln at Duffy's Tavern. I don't know if you guys remember Duffy's Tavern down there. And absolutely would just, bite it. Get up on stage. It's no different than fighting. You get in the ring, and the way you improve is by getting the shit beat out of you, right? So I get up on stage and just crash and burn it. It's, you suck. I mean, just like some of the most horrific shit you could hear, and you go home and just sob, lay in bed and just cry myself to sleep. Kidding. But I literally, that's where I cut my teeth, down at Duffy's. And then I started doing stand-up comedy up here, just in, like open mic nights and shit. And then I took a job at the Funny Bone Comedy Club that used to be off 114th and Dodge Street. And I was a doorman there. So I got to know comedians and then got to know the manager. And I was like, how do I bust into the Funny Bone? So the Funny Bone was like this franchise with, I think at the time they had 20 some odd, locations throughout the country. So I was like, well, how do I audition for the Funny Bone? How do I get in and get the stamp for approval? I was like, well, you have to go down to St. Louis. That's the headquarters, and that's where you audition. So I drove down, set up this deal, drove down, did an open mic night, ended up taking like first place out of 20 some odd people. Nice. And that gave me the stamp of approval to be able to go and perform at any Funny Bone, right? It was a key. I still had to, I was basically my own manager, agent, so I had to work myself into those places. So I start calling around and performed at the location. So you have MCs, right, that introduce the feature act in your headline, and MCs will do 15, 20 minutes, and then your feature acts will do 30 minutes. And typically you would need, maybe 45 minutes of material or an hour's worth of material. And then you have your headline act, which needs an hour of material, and typically they'd need an hour and a half. I don't know if it works the same. You probably have some local community. Well, that's not how it's done these days. But back then, you could burn through your material pretty quickly if you are performing on a Friday night. And people, because at the end of the week, people are like, hey, I've been working my ass off all week long. And now you need to make me fucking laugh. Yeah. Make me laugh, comic. So you can start churning through your material. So I started doing stand-up, I would travel. I'd, have a gig set up at a Funny Bone in Des Moines or in Schaumburg, Illinois, and then I would book myself on what we called one-night stands at other locations. It'd be, dumpy little restaurants or a hotel.
How much are you getting paid for this stuff at that time?
I think $100 for a one-night stand, and then at the Funny Bone, I think it was $150, $200.
And you're traveling, and you got hotels and everything are coming over.
Yeah, kind of sounds like being a musician.
Being a musician,
completely.
So in other words, you were rich early on.
I sold my body, in some circumstances at truck stops. I was kind of the lot lizard type, just to make a few extra. Listen, I need gas. I don't know what to tell you. I need help. But I was broke, driving a Ford Taurus. I think I had in transits on it for at least 8-10 months. That was always my magic trick with any car I bought. It was, well, I can wait. I don't need plates yet.
Yeah.
So
hide those tags, kind of have it folded over so
Yeah.
the cops can't see the actual date.
I didn't even notice that. You couldn't see
Yeah.
the date? Oh,
You
tricky.
can drive for 2
Yeah.
years like that.
Right. Exactly.
So this was before you became a police officer then, or
Yeah.
during the process, or how did that?
Yes, he was breaking the law before he was
okay.
a police
Yeah.
officer.
Long before. Statute of limitations, way the hell.
He was
yeah.
driving on expired plates long before.
I was actually driving on expired plates when I lived in Denver. I was working for the Denver Police Department dispatch when Thrasher had gone out there, and he did a lateral transfer as a cop. And he'll tell the story. You have to ask him when you interview him at some point. But I had a Toyota Tacoma. I was always broke. And I drove that thing literally for 3 years. To the point where I was in Bellevue, like 3 years later, and got stopped. And you would think I'd go to jail,
Yeah.
right? I'd
Oh,
be
yeah.
sentenced to prison for that one. And it was so ridiculously far-fetched for that. And they were like, there's no way that this guy would be able to drive
Yeah.
for 3 years without plates. I'm seeing this wrong. And I'm like, I don't know, it's just paperwork's all jacked up. I've been trying to get him. They put the wrong dates on there and everything. The guy's like, all right, you're good to go. And it's near the end of his shift. He's like, I'm not
Yeah,
about
I'm
to
not-
jack with
I'm
this
not
shit,
digging
right?
into this one.
I'm going to be working till midnight. So, yeah.
Okay.
So this is before I was a cop.
Before. Okay. And then what was the transition? How did you end up becoming a police officer? Where was that, and how did that look?
Well, I started to grow up, and that was the transition, right? So I was realizing that I needed a job that was actually going to allow me to eat and to live in a place. I was always living with Thrasher, riding his coattails, and he was always a great friend. He's like, dude, you can crash on my couch if you want. You know, I was just broke, constantly broke. Credit agencies chasing me. I think at one point I had that pickup truck. I was behind on payments, and I was like, bro, I need to park in your garage. And a tow truck
Don't
is
wanna leave
parked
it on
up the
the
street
street,
with the
yeah.
lights off, and the
Yeah.
guy's just waiting for me. And I had a friend that, from what I was told, Toyota called a bunch of my friends. Were like, listen, we will give you $500 if you tell us where that truck is. And I got some really good fucking friends. They're like, damn it, $500 will go a long way. And they're like, it's okay.
We got
Yeah.
you.
Tempted
Yeah,
to turn
yeah.
yourself in for that $500.
Yeah, completely. Can I get the 500?
Yeah.
Just apply that to what I owe you. So I started testing for law enforcement agencies, and I'd worked security. I worked loss prevention out in Colorado, Aurora. I worked, ShopCo, loss prevention. I worked corrections, Douglas County. So I worked a lot of different jobs. Crossroads Mall security. That's where I met Thrasher. A bunch of us had worked at Crossroads.
Yeah.
And anything to kind of get my feet wet and to try and, build upon the experience, thinking that that's going to help me get into an agency when realistically it's, they couldn't care less what your background is. They almost, as it pertains to security, they almost don't want that, right? Because then you come in and they have to break you of any bad habits
Right.
that you've been.
Unlearn you,
Yeah, unlearn you, exactly. So I tested for probably 15, 20 different departments, literally for 8 to 10 years. And it was top of the list, and it just kept getting pushed off, and then finally got picked up by Douglas County. Well, actually, that's not true. I got picked up by Pot County, Potawatomi, and I worked there as a reserve deputy. So that was a great experience. And I was there for about a year and a half, and then I got on with Douglas County Sheriff's Office
Okay.
and became a deputy sheriff at that point.
Awesome. So did being a comedian help you at all as a police officer? I'm sure it would have to in some ways.
Yeah, I'll tell you where it really helped me is when I got into, I was on road patrol, and then I got into the narcotics, the criminal interdiction unit, and it was a canine handler. So our job was specific to working I-80, the little small stretch from 126th, which is the furthest going west, all the way down to the river when I'm working eastbound, and then vice versa, the river all the way to 126th, right? So having that experience, the comedy experience, you start to befriend people. You pull them over, and it's a completely different line of work, right? So we're out to make a dent on the cartels and transporting large amounts of narcotics and weapons and whatever. So that really kind of helped me in pulling people over and befriending them and getting them to kind of let their guard down. They feel a little bit more comfortable in telling you certain things and splitting people up. So it just kind of honed the people skills side. So yeah, that had some bearing on it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. One time I got pulled over. One of the funnier stories I've got. I got pulled over, and this cop, I see him coming up in the mirror, and the big burly guy, kind of looks like you. And I roll down the window, and he's got his round hat pulled down, and He's like, "Can I see your license and registration, please?" He had this tiny little voice, and I still to this day don't know if that was his real voice or if he was just messing with me like Super Troopers. But it was.
Now here's the deal.
Yeah, your license. He talked the whole way that whole time. I'm like,
So he probably did it on purpose. He threw you off guard, and then he's like, "All right, now give me the marijuana."
I did have dreadlocks at the time, so I got pulled over all the
Did
time.
you really?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, that's kick-ass.
Yeah, all the time. Four times in 1 year, I think I got pulled over. So
no shit.
So jumping back to comedy, and feel free to jump in with any of your own questions, Mick. This is just kind of some of the stuff I've written down. So I love stand-up comedy. I've toyed with the idea of doing it myself, mostly because I'm not funny. I'd like to really try to learn how to be funny.
You get a really good sense of humor.
Timing, I think I don't have the timing,
It
but
takes a lot of practice.
That's what I'm like. Do you have any kind of intense or funny stories or any bits from the road that you remember or have fond memories of?
That you're willing to share.
Yeah. It depends. Is my wife gonna watch this? I do have I've got a pretty crazy story that you got to keep in mind. I was 19, 20 at the time, and people called me. You remember Anthony Michael Hall from 16 Candles and Breakfast Club, right?
Yeah.
So everyone called me Anthony Michael Hall. I looked like him. I had the poofy do, and I was probably 160 pounds, 150 pounds at the time. I had this cheesy 8x10 photo with this dorky sport coat on. You know, it's the typical 8x10 black and white. You know, it's a comic, and my hair was like hairsprayed straight up.
Headshot?
Yeah, headshot. Yeah. So, so when you would book yourself in between, en route to do a bigger show, right, at a more well-known place like a Funny Bone Comedy Club, you'd book those 1-8 stands, and they were in some shitty places, right? Some really dumps, and you would have very little people, or you'd have a big crowd, and it's a different crowd. So this was in Wilkesboro.
Where's that?
Was Wilkesboro? Was it? I almost said North Carolina. It's not. Is it? No, I'm sorry. Wilkesboro is North Carolina. This is Beloit, South Beloit, Indiana.
Oh yeah.
So right at the border, Illinois border. So I booked this deal, and the guy that I'd spoken with barely spoke any English. And I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. I'm probably going to get murdered or something, you know. And I go and perform, and I'll never forget. The room was set up in such a weird fashion, right? Mm-hmm. So and there were probably 50, 60 people there. Again, Friday night, bad night. Saturday nights, we talked about this the other day. Saturday nights are better because people are more relaxed. Yeah. They've had some drinks, and then they're ready for a good time. So I get up on stage, and they've got this weird balcony up top, and it looks like it's made out of balsa wood. You lean against it, you're going to fall to your death, right? So I got all these people, and as I'm doing my routine, I didn't have a whole lot of material, and I'm getting worried I'm starting to burn through it pretty quickly, right? The MC had introduced me. I was featuring at this place, and this guy in this group, they keep talking up there, and you got to put a stop to that. If there isn't security there, and security can come up and go, hey, a doorman going, hey, you guys got to keep it down. And there wasn't. This place was a shit dump, you know. So the guy keeps talking, and we have these stock comebacks, that you either create or you steal from somebody else. And I stop for a second. I'm like, hey, where'd you learn how to whisper a fucking helicopter? And everybody starts laughing, right? The whole room starts laughing. And I hear the guy literally stands up and he goes, I'm going to fucking kick your ass. And it's quiet. And I'm like, how do I come back to that? I was like, this guy's going to beat the shit. So I kind of laugh, and everyone's kind of chuckling, but you can tell they were nervous, like they knew this guy. Like, no, seriously.
Oh, no. It's John again, and he's drunk.
Gary probably is going to take you out back, and he's going to stab you, right?
Yeah.
So I throw out the next one. I'm like, I'm gonna fucking go for broke. And I go, you should have come here wearing a condom on your head, because you're going to act like a dick, you ought to dress like one. Right? He goes, I'm going to kick your... It says it again, right? Everyone's laughing. So I made the fatal error in digging in a little bit deeper, because now I'm looking around and people laughing. I'm like, oh, they think I'm funny. I got this. I really do.
Right now.
They love it. So I go, I talked to your mom earlier tonight, and she told me you were going to be a real problem. Well, after she went and swallowed... And that was it. Literally went nuclear. I'm going to beat the fuck, stands up, and I take off, right? It was like at the end of my session. I'm like, thank you, good night. Drop the microphone and run. And I go to the bar and I'm like 19, 20, years old. I can't drink, unless sometimes they pass alcohol to you. So I go to the bar and I lean on the bar and I'm thinking, I fucking crushed it. Everybody's laughing. And I'm thinking this guy, he's going to calm down. He's going to stay up there, right? So I lean in, I go, I'll take a Coke if I could. And a guy goes, you need to get the fuck out of here right now. And I laugh and he goes, no, I'm serious. Gary is going to beat the living shit out of you. I'm like, this is a legit thing? Oh, yeah, Gary's crazy. Gary's killed a couple people. I'm like, I'm gone. Fucking run out the back door. Got in my Ford Taurus and I'm driving down the road. Shit in my pants. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll never heckle a heckler again.
Dude, it was bad. It was
See,
so
we run
bad.
into that stuff a lot on stage and music, too. Like there's, I play Irish music and a lot of Irish songs, most of them are about 50 verses long and inevitably someone dies. And they're like these ballads, they're kind of sad, and they're great stories, but they're kind of sad. And so you're pouring your guts into a song and some fucking tool is carrying on a conversation while the rest of the audience are damn near crying and you're like, yeah, I got them. And then there's always the one guy talking to his wife on the phone. Yeah, no, I'm just having one more. We're just, and you're just like, fucking,
Yeah.
pick a window, you're leaving. Yeah.
And what you're talking about on Friday nights, like I've been playing music forever and I never really understood Friday nights. You say people have been working all week long and they're just ready to kind of unwind. And we played a show just this Friday night at a place and it was an acoustic show and people were kind of attentive for us. But then we had this singer-songwriter from Texas who's written songs for, gold record selling artists. And he's doing his thing, sounding great. And there's literally people in the background completely ignoring him, and not just ignoring him, but whoa, whoa, yeah, like hooping and hollering about something completely different, not even during an acoustic show. And it ended up kind of being a thing because there was basically a website that follows our type of music that posted something about it, and the promoter had to get on. He's like, hey, Friday nights, right? I made the mistake. This guy was coming through. We should have just maybe not booked him, but I wanted to give him the shot. So he made his money, whatever. But yeah, Friday nights as a performer are interesting. And I imagine they can be even worse for comedy because you're playing music. You can at least make noise and
you can turn the volume up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can drown them out a bit, but you get somebody, and it's always somebody in the crowd who's like a group of dudes, and it's like, Mick's funnier than this guy. Mick, say something. And then Mick yells something, and then it becomes this thing where it's heckling from the table, and it's nonstop. And those guys are laughing their asses off because they don't give a shit because Mick's the funny one.
Yeah.
But Saturday nights, like I've done the third show, and that was absolutely the worst. It was in the Shaco Slip in fucking Virginia, and it was in Richmond. It was absolutely a nightmare because everybody's inebriated. They're tanked. You got the third show starting at like 11 o'clock or midnight. I'm like, oh, and I had to do that.
But wouldn't they just laugh at anything at that point?
No, they laugh at their friend. Then it's just a free for all. Everybody's yelling shit at you, and it's like you might as well just set the microphone down or hand it to you. Here you go, big guy.
Yeah,
have at it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing funnier than, like, for comedians, there is nothing funnier than seeing another comedian crash and burn. And that's the funny part, right? And then you start playing, I told you this, you start playing to the comedians, right? So if you have a crowd that's inattentive and they're talking the entire time. I did a holiday and I was so stoked. I roll up, it's got my name up on a sign. It's in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I'm like, oh, I'm a big fucking deal, right? I get in there, I've got my picture on this little like easel thing, it's got my photo Shea Degan, and I'm like, that's right, I'm a feature act. And it was absolutely horrific. It was horrific. 400 people. I mean, people showed up. There's a shitload of people there, but they're all talking. This comedy show starts, MC does his bit, he falls flat, and I'm like, well, this isn't a real good sign. I got to try and win these people. So I get up on stage and everybody's just talking full volume at the table. Like I'm like, is the microphone even on? So I crash and burn. I burn through my material in a matter of like 10 minutes. And a guy by the name of Drew Hastings, who had been on Johnny Carson, he's funnier than shit. Drew gets up there and I'm like, good luck. And Drew gets up and nobody's listening to him. And then he turns it around and starts playing to us. which is funny because now it's like, well, if you're not gonna listen to me and you're not gonna laugh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
make these guys laugh. So he's like, hey, some of you guys may have seen me on the Carson show, and I had some funny bits. And what's that? And no one's talking to me. He goes, oh yeah, that is a good one. That's it. I'm not gonna do that one. But if you know of any funny, what's that? Oh, that is one of my favorites. I'm gonna do that one. And finally, you just had it. He goes, fuck all y'all. Puts the microphone down, runs off, and then they about got in a fist fight with the manager. Manager's like, I'm not paying you. And he's like, you're gonna pay me. And I was in the back. I got my check for $100. I'm like, I'm out.
So you may not know this, but obviously, I've had some very cool people through the gym through the years. One of Ireland's greatest living comedians, Tommy Tiernan. This guy plays to sold out arenas in Europe. He's got TV shows. I get a call one day at the gym, and one of the guys answers the phone. He's like, "Hey Mick, somebody from the Irish television station RTE want to talk to you." And I was like, "The fuck?" And I was like, "Oh no, this is my sister. She's always trying to prank me." So I get on the phone and they're like, "Yes, this is Maura from RTE television." I'm like, "Sure, yeah, Maura, what can I help you with?" And she's like, so Tommy Tiernan is doing a tour of America and he wants to stop by your gym." And I was like, "Oh, I'm fucking sure he does, And I was like, "Yeah, send him in." And she's like, "So you're willing to do that?" I was like, "Sure, yeah." And she's like, "Well, he's bringing a film crew." And I was like, my sister's name is Neve. At this point, I was like, "All right, Neve, fuck off. Like, come on." And she's like, "Hello?" And I was like, "Neve, enough. I know you're joking." And she's like, "Now, this is Maura from RTE and Mr. Tiernan would like to film." And I was like, "Sure." So she's telling me all this stuff. So I get on the internet and I look and I see Tommy Tiernan is touring America. And I was like, "Oh, fuck." So I was like, yeah, no, why is he picking Omaha, Nebraska? And she's like, "Well, he wants to try out new material in small venues." And I was like, this guy plays like stadiums. And so sure as hell, they come to the gym he's filming a DVD about America. And how will they receive his type of comedy, which is raw? And so he comes to the gym, he films a bit for his DVD, and afterwards we're talking, and he goes, "Yeah, you have to come to the show where I'm playing at the Funny Bone." And I was like, "Tommy," I'm like, "The Funny Bone's like kind of a small comedy club." And he's like, "Oh no, I know." He goes, "This is why I'm doing this." He goes, "I want to see like real American audiences and how this will go." And I'm like, so we're in Omaha, Nebraska, and like you use the word fuck a lot, like a lot. And he's like, "Oh, I know." And he goes, "But I'm not going to change anything." He goes, I want to see like how it goes over. So basically his whole DVD was him traveling around America, at some places absolutely slaying it, and then other places just bombing because people were not ready for his sense of humor. And I'm like, "Well, how do you think that's going to go here?" And he's like, "Well, Mick," he goes, "the way I see it," he goes, he said, what did he say? He said, people get, he goes, "There's walls set up," he goes, "with language and stuff like that." And he goes, "And the word fuck is my chisel." And I was like, "Well, you're going to be banging away." So he goes to the Funny Bone. He's like the feature act, the act before the main act. So, and like you could tell that these comedians didn't really know who he was. And you probably wouldn't over here unless you were watching, English, Irish
like
television.
He's doing an HBO or some kind of his own
And
Showtime.
so he comes on and fucking just slays it at the Funny Bone, has the whole place just rolling and like, whoa, where'd this guy come from? But the main act comes on and he stands on the stage and I shit you not, he goes,
I can't follow that.
yeah. And he's like, "That was funny." And he's like, he's got nothing at this point. But, the gym has been such a cool place to kind of like, you get all sorts of personalities and everything through there.
Well, and I think that's one thing I've experienced a couple times being from Omaha. Like we'll have big name comedians come through. And I remember one year for my birthday, we had a big name comedian come through. My birthday's in January. And so we went and saw him, and it was funny, but I was like, it was kind of a letdown, honestly, Well, a year later, his Netflix special comes out. It's all the same material that he did, in Omaha, but it was all worked out. It was all funny.
Fine-tuned.
So
Yeah.
it was like, we're the first stop, see how these Midwesterners, these prudes out here kind of deal with it, and then chisels it down, works on it probably all year, and then films his comedy
Well, your
special.
smaller venues, I mean, if you can make a joke work in a smaller venue, more than likely it's going to work in a larger venue. Right? So, I mean, the rule of thumb is you try a joke 5 times before you dump it. So if it falls flat, it could be the venue. You just continue to try it and you tweak it and you work on the timing and maybe change up the words. B's and P's are funny, right? The F, fuck, right? But it's like I punched her in the butt. But it's funny.
It's
I mean,
funny,
it's stupid what I just said, but it's those powerful, words. That's why
Yeah.
people get into trouble because they become blue comics. It's blue
Yeah.
material. It's funny to be able to drop the F-bomb. And
So have you ever debated going back to comedy just for fun, or do you still, no?
I don't,
I've heard the
it's-
environment is different these days.
I don't know. Maybe it is, but I'll tell you, it's funny because you hear this from most comedians. I used to fret getting up on stage. I mean, I literally would all day long. So, you wake up at 10 o'clock. I mean, it's a dream job, right?
Yeah.
As long as you're making good money. It's a dream job. You sleep until 10, 11 o'clock, get up. And a lot of times at condos, we'd have Nintendo or you'd have what a ColecoVision or whatever the hell it was at the time, right? Sega Genesis, and we'd play games until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Then we'd go catch a movie, and then at like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, my stomach started to turn, and I started thinking about the show and whether or not I was going to succeed. I didn't want to bomb, and then I couldn't eat, and then I had the shits, and then I'd get up on stage, and if I freaking crushed it. There's no better high. I'm sure you experience that too when you guys have an incredible set. Same with you, that you get off stage and you're flying higher than a kite. There's no better high than that, But when you crash and burn, you just want to. I'm running out the back door. I'm like, fuck this.
That's interesting because I feel like that's one place where comedy differs from music, one of many places. Because I used to get super nervous, but now that I do it so often playing
Yeah.
music, I look forward to shows. I really don't even think about them much towards the day. I try to maybe get practice up beforehand, but playing music seems to be like I don't know, enjoyable, and I could see how comedy, and who knows, maybe the guys at the top look forward to their show, or who knows, maybe they're still fretting and they still kind of use.
But like
For
with
me-
music and even fighting and stuff, when you deal with like performance anxiety, we have a process of practice that we have to go through. You're training, or for you're practicing. Do comics do that? Like, do you stand, like, would a comic stand in front of a mirror and
Yeah.
so,
At my house, I was living at home with my parents at the time, but I bought a PA and a microphone, and I would practice in the basement because there's so much that involves the microphone, right? It depends on how close you're going to get and you're doing funny voices, or, you're going to do sound effects or whatever the case is. You use that as a tool for your comedy. So yeah, I mean, I practice. In fact, I'd practice my material in my hotel room. We all typically did before a
Really?
show. Yeah. Or you practice in front of some people to see. You try it. You'd make
Bounce
some
it
crack
off
at a
people.
restaurant. Maybe a waitress that walks up and you drop the line. You slip it in there somehow and see if they laugh. And they laugh. You're like, okay, maybe this thing's got legs. Maybe it doesn't.
Makes
But you give it a
sense.
shot.
yeah, I was kind of unaware. I just thought there's some guys that are funny, can just get up there and do it, and
There's a big difference, though. I mean, you can be really, really funny, right, around your friends and around other people. You can be quite humorous, but when you get up on stage, it's a different freaking beast,
And
right?
people
It's-
are expecting you to be funny, I would think.
it-
I don't know.
Well, you got to remember that your friends, right, the people you're around, you kind of have a little more control, and they know who you are, and it's easier to kind of get them into the stories and laughing. But you get in front of such a wide array of individuals and personalities and whatever's happened in their day, and it's it just, you get up on stage and you do something wrong and somebody immediately writes you off, and I don't think this guy's funny. What I mean? That's why the first thing out of your mouth has got to be, you got to break the ice. You got to say something funny. If you can say
Yeah.
something funny right off the bat and get them hooked, then you got them hooked. But
And warmed up.
it's just one of those things that, like comedy, it's like you're bearing your soul. You know what I mean? It's like, this is, and to me, that's, if people don't laugh at my stuff, then I'm just like, I really suck.
so falling kind of flat on your face in comedy routines and different things like that. Do you think that kind of prepared you for kind of your entrepreneurial side, which we're going to kind of get into
Yeah.
this, if it works, it works. We'll try it out. And
Yeah, I was going to ask because from what you've told us so far, not great in school as a kid, not great in college. Go to the Coast Guard, police officer. Well, comedy police officer. Obviously, that's not where you're at today.
Right.
And we're sitting in one of your buildings, and it's really cool. So where did that kind of start? Where did those things maybe either come together, or where did it start to diverge where you started looking towards the entrepreneurial side?
Well, so the comedy, I think, really prepared me for it. And it was, because I grew up too. You know what I mean? I had to be responsible at the time. And it was a very difficult thing for a 19 or 20-year-old to have to do, booking my own shows and driving across the country. But then it was it got to the point where it was like, I can't keep doing this, right? And I'm not going to make a living at this. And I don't want to be traveling. You're standing up on stage in a smoke-filled room, and most comedians become alcoholics because you're drinking before your set, you're drinking after your set, and it's just that lifestyle isn't anything that I necessarily wanted to be, tied into. So, it really caused me to grow up quite a bit. And then when I got back, I started going to college again. I went back to UNO and was studying criminal justice. And oddly, I ended up making the dean's list, not with basket weaving classes and slimnastics. Some difficult classes.
Did you have your typerider still
at this point? All the grades were falsified, so I was on the dean's list because I said I'm on the dean's list. I applied myself at this point, right? And I had joined, so I did the comedy thing for a bit, and then I joined the Coast Guard. And then when I got out of the Coast Guard, I went back into comedy. And the Coast Guard helped me to grow up a tremendous amount as well, both of those. And I was like, I got to stop screwing around. I got to figure this out, right? So I went back to school because I'm thinking at that time, like all of us have been brainwashed into believing that you have to go to school. You got to go to college. You got to get a degree. You're not going to be worth shit. So I went back, even though I didn't want to go to school, I didn't want to apply myself. That's not how I learned. It's like telling somebody, hey, this is how you do bicep curls, right? Or tricep extensions. It depends on your skeletal structure, right? One way of me lifting weights may not be good for you. And it may not hit the muscle in the way that you want it to. So it's a lot like that with learning. And I don't think that a college degree is indicative of a person's intelligence. Right. It really boils down to...
I've met a lot of academic morons in my life. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with a shit work ethic, right? Yeah. So I went back to college and applied myself. And it was one of those things that, I was like, I got to prove this to myself and to my parents that I can do it if I apply myself. And I was on the dean's list, was the president of the Criminal Justice Student Organization. But what really helped me get to that point was I was more focused because I knew what I wanted to do. At that time, I was like, okay, I want to get into law enforcement. So now I'm interested. Before, when I was undecided, I was like, well, fuck, I don't know. I'm jumping all over the place. It's like musical freaking chairs. And so once I kind of fine-tune that, then I literally have a semester. I'm a semester away from a bachelor's degree from UNO, and I quit years and years ago. So I started working for, security companies and thought this is where I'm headed, right? I want to get into law enforcement, started testing, and eventually got in. But what changed with on the entrepreneurial side, it made me more fearless, right? In doing things, the comedy piece, being a cop too. And I saw, you have to consider that the industry that I was in with both of my businesses, the first business being Signal 88 Security that I founded back in 2003 with my wife. Security, well, it's applicable to what I was doing as a cop, right? So, I was able to see a lot of crazy things that were going on. Of course, in my previous experience in security, and I like to solve problems. So I saw all these problems. But I'm also the kind of guy, we talk about the model and building the model and not following the directions. I'm the kind of guy that wants to go off the beaten path. So I'm the black sheep of the family, right? And I'm like, no, I'm going to do things my way. I'm going to do it differently. Not many people go down the route of doing stand-up comedy, right? A lot of people go down the path of joining the military, but I was just kind of like, I was trying to escape something, trying to find myself there too. But then I got to the point where I was like, challenging a lot of just old school methodologies, like when it comes to security, right? So when I was a deputy with Douglas County, I had the liberty working in the canine interdiction unit. I got a ton of comp time because we'd get these big loads of dope, and then I'd have all this extra time doing these cases, right? So I was taking off time. Well, a lot of cops will supplement their income by working off duty. And a friend of mine from Crossroads was running loss prevention at a particular department store. And he was like, hey, summertime, we get these kids in these Fast and Furious cars and they're peeling out and doing crazy shit. Are you able to do security? You can just sit in the lot in your uniform and it'll pay you $35 an hour. And $35 an hour in 2001. I mean, 35 is a lot of money nowadays for an off-duty cop. I was like, typically it's $20 or $25 at that time. I was like, holy shit, I'm in. So I start working the deal. Well, then they all start going next door. I displace the kids off of that property. They go next door and they're peeling out. This is on a Friday, Saturday night, right? In summertime. So light bulb goes off and I'm like, well, maybe I can get this other, company on board, but instead of charging them $35 an hour, how about I approach them and go, hey, it's $17.50 an hour. And then I go back to this other, it was Kohl's and it was linen and things out by Oakview Mall. So I want to go back to Kohl's and say, hey, we'll do $17.50. So I'm cutting this in half, 50%. However, I would recommend that we extend this. So make it 6 months as opposed to 3 months, right? It's a win-win situation for everybody. So start displacing the kids, all go to linen and things. But the problem was linen and things, I didn't know the hierarchy of things. It isn't like the manager at this gigantic national chain is going to have the decision-making ability to say, yeah, let's start security. So that's when I started rapidly realizing how business worked and that I had to get to the HQ. So I had a video business, right? If video like weddings and receptions and knew how to edit and do all that. So one night I filmed this melee in the parking lot and there's like 150 cars and there's a fist fight that breaks out. I'm like, this is perfect. So I'm filming from the lot of all the kids that I've displaced that are now hanging out in the other lot that aren't getting kicked off. I'm filming the whole thing. Cars are peeling out, loud music, fist fight. I'm like, this is good. I walk it right into the store the next day with a VHS tape and the manager goes, holy shit. We got to get security. So hired me on a spot, $17.50. So now I start going to all the other stores around and then bring everybody's price down. And what that did is wouldn't allow anybody else from a competitor, a security competitor to come in and take that from me because you'd have to get 4, 5, 6 different
So
locations.
you're basically doing a route.
Doing
like
a route.
Mobile route, yeah.
So it's a roving vehicle patrol in my personal vehicle. And then I got magnets. And then I got to a company called Investors Realty, property management company. And he said, hey, listen, we don't want to do business with an individual. We want to do business with a person, with a business rather. And I said, okay. So went to Subway with my wife. We're sitting there trying to come up with names that are kind of tied into law enforcement. So we came up with Signal 88. And the reason we came up with Signal 88 is because in the state of Nebraska, Signal 88 means situation secure, all is safe and secure. So if I make a traffic stop, I hit out and I don't get back on the radio and it's been a bit. I may get another unit that'll ask, hey, King 6, are you 88? Or dispatch, and it'll say negative, I'm not 88 at this time. So it's a hidden language that, oh shit, he's got an issue. So we're going to send a cavalry. We're going to send a few people until he's 88. So I figured it was good because now police officers, there's such a terrible stereotypical image of the security industry, security guards, right? And I wanted to create a level that was much higher. Now we're talking off-duty cops at this time, but it eventually went to civilian-based security. And I knew it was going to go there. That's why I decided to name it Signal 88 so that there would be a little bit more respect. So if our guys or civilians are out patrolling and police officers see them, they're not these wannabes and maybe they'll accept them a little bit more. It's kind of like a cadet, right? As opposed to a security guard is more of a derogatory term. So investors at the time, this is law enforcement based, they were like, you put it together a business and we'll think about it. So we came up with the name Signal 88 Security Group. And then I knew how to work Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. So I designed my own, graphics, my own brand or logo and made some brochures and it turned out great. And they were blown away and they contracted me. And then from that point, it just freaking took off. And then I had Hearthstone Homes was like, hey, they were paying for law enforcement-based security. He said, it's an exorbitant amount of money. We'd like to have civilians. Do you have a civilian side? And I didn't at the time. I go, yeah, what do you need? And they were like, because I've always considered myself to be a sprinter and I'm not going to pass up the opportunity. I could put it together, and and I have the ability to just bust my ass and make it happen. So I didn't want to pass it up. So I was like, yeah. And they said, well, we'd like to start in 2 weeks and it would be 100 and some odd hours a week. So I jumped on it. And then the civilian side started taking off. Then I had other companies calling that I'm going out and create a sales team. So that company starts to really grow locally here in Omaha. And then the light bulb pops, because with entrepreneurs, there's a difference between entrepreneurs and small business owners. I don't know if you guys know this.
Yeah.
So, entrepreneurs think grand scale, right? And are risk takers. And for me, it was one of those things where I wouldn't have been happy until I was like in Germany. My wife is from Germany. I'm at a cafe on a corner and I see a Signal 88 patrol vehicle drive by. Or even on a smaller scale, let's say I'm at San Diego and I'm sitting at a cafe, outdoor cafe, and Signal 88 vehicle goes by. That's what I wanted. So that was my vision, right? Don't create that ceiling and say, well, I'm going to call on Dodge Street Security, and then I'm locked in on Dodge Street, and that's as far as it goes, So I thought, I don't want to do branches throughout the United States because all these other security companies do it. And they end up watering themselves down, because you go to the HQ for some of these large, multi-billion-dollar security companies, you go to their headquarters, all the guys have their teeth and they look sharp. But the further you get away from that HQ into these other branch locations, they start, the uniforms look like they've been ironed with a hot fucking rock, and they're missing teeth. And it just starts to kind of get, real dumpy. So I thought, what's the solution to that? Well, the solution is, when you own your own business, and you guys know this, that's the owner-operator mentality, right? You want the best of the best with your business, and you're going to do whatever it takes to succeed. So if I could somehow find people to run these businesses with the same mindset, it would undoubtedly be successful. And the only way that I could do that was by franchising. And nobody had franchise security. So it was either it's been tried before and it failed, or it's never been tried. And I'm stubborn. And for me, at the time when I was starting Signal 88, Joe Leggett and some of my friends of mine that worked in security were like, you can't do it that way. When I was structuring it, right? You can't, that's not the way it's done. It's like, what do you mean? Well, that's not how it's always been. Well, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
This is the way I think it should be done. This is my business, and I'm gonna format it in a manner that is going to be more successful. It makes more sense. So I went down that unbeaten path, right, and did things on my own, and it ended up changing the industry. So when I started franchising, we had extreme success. In fact, we were the first company to franchise, and I think there's a dozen plus companies out there that franchise security, and we blew up. The company blew up. I think when I sold my local company in 2013, started in 2003, started the franchise group in 2008, and then sold it in 2015, was bought out by an investment group. We had 300 and some odd franchises in 4 countries.
Wow.
Absolutely took off. It took off.
From a meeting in Subway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, and it just seems like you saw a need and you had the skills to fill it. And then, I mean, the industry, you kind of, like you said, you changed the industry, right? The industry wasn't being efficient. And so you found an efficient way to do it and make it professional. That's really interesting to kind of think about. And so along those lines, what type of advice would you have for young entrepreneurs that kind of want to do the same thing, or who might recognize a need but they're not quite sure how to fill it?
I mean, it's going to sound really corny. Is whatever the idea is that you come up with, run with it. Run fast and hard with it, and don't give up until it's successful. I think far too often people come up with an idea and they don't stick with it. Right? They expect to become successful right out of the gates. And 88 Tactical is a prime example. Realistically, 88 Tactical started back in 2009. It was basically a training division within Signal 88 Security. Now, I didn't buy the Takema facility, the 160-acre outdoor facility, until I think it was 2011. So let's say I started the business in 2011. It's been 7 years, almost 8 years I've been in business. I can't take a paycheck yet. Right? I mean, we're breaking even. We're finally doing well, but people have to understand that when you start up a business, this is none of this bullshit where you
overnight success.
Success. I freaking hate, and bands especially. It's like, man, these guys formed a band like overnight. Man, they hit it big. They're multimillionaires now. No. You didn't see the 10 years where they were sleeping in their freaking car out in the parking lot of some shit dump. The one that I performed in that I almost got my ass kicked. They don't see what goes into it. They have no idea the time and the effort and the sacrificing, and you can't expect it to be an overnight success.
Right. Well, like Maroon 5, right? Huge band right now. Their guitarist is from Lincoln, and friend of a friend. Back before they were big, their parents were FedExing them food. They were living in their van, and their parents were FedExing them food because they weren't making enough money. So,
this is what. Just so you know, stories like this is one of the reasons I came to America, because I always believed that there was only one spot in the world where I could pull the shit off that I wanted to pull off. And that was to come here, because growing up in Ireland, we would always hear of these success stories, especially Irish people that come here and been successful. But you would actually get to hear the full story. Like there was no overnight success. You would hear the blood and guts part of it too. And I think sometimes that immigrant mentality of like, well, fuck it, I'm in for the long haul because this is better than what I have going on here, and I don't see much light here, you know, and you just want to go for it. So, you know, stories like this is exactly why I ended up parked here too.
Well, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs these days, or at least people that think they're entrepreneurs, don't understand what 10 years looks like. They don't understand what 10 years of not taking a paycheck looks like. They see billionaire, you know, Ubers and whatnot that they had some pretty quick success. But you know, you can be successful as an entrepreneur and not have $1 billion business, right? But it's going to be a lot of hard work. And it seems like a lot of those, I notice it being a musician, you know, guitar playing has really taken a hit, and guitar companies are starting to go out of business because no one's learning how to play the guitar anymore. I think part of that's because it's really hard to do. You're not going to be able to play guitar in a year.
People are impatient.
Yeah.
They're so ridiculously impatient.
Yeah, we talk about this quite often. We all practice jiu-jitsu, and it's the one martial art where it's going to take fucking forever to become a black belt. And so, you know, when you come into a jiu-jitsu gym and they're like, well, I'd like to be a black belt. And you're like, well, it's going to take about 10 years. And you're like, well, what?
I don't have that much time.
Yeah, I could go to a taekwondo school and be a black belt in 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, you can be a white belt with no stripes for 2 years.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, you're thinking, man, I could be down the street. That guy's got a black belt, and I'm walking into a gym with no stripes. But there's guys that have been training here for 2 years that still have no stripes, and they're kicking my ass. Like, when do I get some kind of grade here or some kind of signpost that I might be doing okay?
I know some people who will probably be 10-year white belts.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, jiu-jitsu is also one of those things where if you just stay in and keep doing it, like, you'll get that black belt. Who cares how long it takes?
Yeah, what's that quote that we talk about, Chris Howard?
Yeah, it's not who's best, it's who's left.
Yeah, who's left.
Oh, that's good.
So,
it's very similar to business, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be willing to put in the time and just not give up, you know? You can't give up.
So did you run into any problems when you were scaling it? I mean, it wasn't like you skyrocketed it. It took a good 10 years. Did you run into kind of any major issues when you were scaling it or franchising, like going from you doing it to one franchise to 300 franchises? Did you run into any kind of common problems along those lines?
Well, we did all the time. And the reason we ran into those common problems, or not even common problems, uncommon problems, is because it had never been done before. You know what I mean? So we were literally pioneers in that particular area. So every day was a challenge in trying to figure things out until we kind of got it honed in on. The toughest part, of course, was creating the proof of concept, the local business. And that's the problem, is that, you know, most entrepreneurs aren't ready to say, okay, my baby's done. It's ready. Let's put it on the market, or it's, you know, let's start franchising this. It's always, oh, hold on a second, I got to tweak this. Hold on, I not yet. Give me another 6 months or so. At some point, you have to say, hey, listen, I'm ready to rock and roll. But also, there's a point where it has to be good enough. It has to serve as a proof of concept, or you get yourself in a lot of trouble, right? So I create this business, and I say, listen, Josh, I'm franchising this new company, 88 Tactical, and you buy into it, and it fails, it falls flat in your marketplace. Then you start digging into whether or not this was a solid business, right? And I share with you that, well, we were failing. we were losing money month over month, and you bought a franchise, and we needed to make money on the franchising side. I'm in deep shit, right? So you have to have a proof of concept that is solid, that is going to give people the best possible, run for success. Now, you could be lazy, right? And that could cause the crash and burn of the business. But for the most part, you got to make certain your ducks are in a row.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you've shown too, though, is you're pretty adept at kind of having to adapt. And if something isn't there that can help things move along, that you create it. Can you talk a little bit about the software?
Yeah.
So, because again, you were doing something that had never been industry-wide really tried, right? And along with that, you saw a need there that you could use technology.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously one of the things that I left out. That was a secret recipe behind Signal 88's absolute success, and it enabled me to beat the absolute hell out of the multi-billion-dollar security companies, your Guardsmark, your G4S, and your Securitas. And I was taking contracts away from them here locally, like, candy from a baby. And it was because they weren't. I've always had, I've been blessed with being able to forecast and look down the road, and I've always been big into technology, right? And so I had thought, I got to come up with something that is going to give me an edge, that's going to allow us to stand out. And I'm constantly, I'll lay in bed and my eyes are just darting back and forth, all night long until I can solve the problem. It just drives me fucking crazy until I can figure it out. And at the time this is kind of how it all started. We had cops that were working particular specific locations, and my wife was doing the payroll. So I had one guy who was doing the scheduling, and then you'd get cops that are always, freaking wanting to shift things up. Hey, I'm supposed to work this Friday, but I'm going to get Josh to work for me. So our guy was doing the schedule, like, all right, I'll make the change on the schedule. He'd make the change on the schedule, but it would never get to my wife. So my wife would do payroll, so the other person would get the check, and the guy's like, I didn't get my check, and I'm the one at work that it was. So this is actually kind of funny. There was it Circuit City? Mm-hmm. That was down off of Dodge that kind of went bankrupt years ago. So I bought this Sony Vaio computer, and I never ever buy warranties. And for some reason, I bought a freaking warranty for this thing, and my CD-ROM broke down. So I had to call tech out. So the tech comes out. I'm in my basement. I just started up Signal 88, and I have literally the logo on my screen. And he comes into the base. He's got this Bluetooth. He's a real dorky dude, and he's kind of taking. He's not even talking to me. And I've got all my canine pictures up on the wall of all the seizures and shit too. Little tiny Cracker Jack house, cornered little tiny basement, and he fixes the computer and he leaves. And another 2 weeks later, it goes bad again. So he comes back out, and now it's like, hey, I remember you're the guy that was this. So we start making small talk. He's asked questions about the canine, the interdiction stuff, the photos, and then sees that I have my logo up and that I was working in Adobe Illustrator. He goes, do you know how to do a vector image? I go, yeah. And he goes, I'm starting a company with these PT Cruisers, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to repair. It's going to look like an ambulance, and I'm going to go out and repair computers and start my own computer repair business. And he said, would you do a vector? And I said, yeah. I said, I'll tell you what, do you know how to do HTML? Because I need a website. He goes, I do it. I said, well, you teach me how to do HTML, build a website, and I'll do your logo for you. So we became friends. Started talking, and then he was a brilliant guy, and I started tossing things, back and forth. And I'm like, hey, is there any way to create like a master schedule that we can all look at online? So this is back in 2003, right? He goes, yeah, I can make something like that. So now he's making a master schedule. So anytime I make a change, it sounds ridiculous now because, of course, there's a ton of shit like that out of it, right? Mm-hmm. So make the master change, and then now we're not running into issues. Then I was like, hey, is there any way that we could set up like these different locations? I'd make these little reports, these activity reports, so the guys would have to fill them out. Is there any way to have those uploaded? Yeah, I could do that. So it started. What started as a 500 square foot foundation, by the time the business started blowing up and I was doing College World Series, and we were doing $4.5 million in business in Omaha just alone in this marketplace, I'm now on the 10th floor and it's 30,000 square foot, and it's doing this, right? Because I had no idea where the company was going at the time. And it's nothing that I could avoid, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I was figuring things out. So one thing that I always found to be extremely important is giving clients the ability to go in and read their reports, right? So you have to be able to justify that expense. If I'm out on your property and you never see anything that I'm doing, that I'm pushing people off your lot and finding people loitering or people sniffing around and suspicious characters, you're going to be like, what am I spending? I'm not getting broken into. There hasn't been any graffiti. Trash isn't left. That's because we're doing our job, right? I don't need you guys. Usually security is the last thing thought about and the first thing cut. So I was like, no, we need to make certain that we put all this into the system, and you report that 10 cars try to roll in on the lot, but you pushed them away. And it's constantly, and it's tracking all this data, right? And these stats. And then people started reading that, and then our retention started going through the roof. And it helped us. So it gave us a huge advantage. So no one else out there in security was offering a system like that allowed clients real-time, access to this information. And then we started adding to GPS when GPS became more available, and just made this monstrosity, and then had to rebuild the entire thing from the ground up. So that was really the advantage. And I still have the software company. That was a huge advantage for us.
Did that kind of, I guess, arrogance sometimes that you get with, the bigger security companies that you were like, no, that's not cool. You've kind of taken that approach to kind of demystifying some of the tactical world and kind of making it the same kind of approach to just the everyday people. Although the company is 88 Tactical, it's really, it's not just law enforcement anymore,
right,
or the LEO or the special operator kind of community. This business model is sustainable on just everyday folks. You want to talk a little bit about how that all kind of came about and when things changed for?
Yeah, I mean, it's we can't survive in this business with a 1 or 2% revenue, right, coming in. So the high speed stuff, while it's really kick ass to train up 19th Group Special Forces, or having another special operations group come in and training high speed SWAT dudes in different agencies, it isn't what's going to keep the lights on, right? So I mean, the larger chunk of revenue comes from the civilian side, and we get a ton out of it too. I mean, it's a lot of fun. So at the time, we were focusing strictly on the LEOs and military or special operations, and doing this high speed stuff, high threat CQB, and then the vehicle engagement courses and some of these other classes. But that's not where you're going to make your money, right? So it was like, we have to find something that's more mainstream, and we can get something out of it. Not that we're not getting something out of that, but we really get something out of strengthening our community too. So you get these families that come in here, and it's pretty cool to see kids go through anti-bullying, anti-abduction class, and you see it every day with your gym.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it just what's the little guy's name that
Titus.
Yeah. What a stud. What a freaking cool story, right? To be able to see that and have that kind of an impact on lives is really, something special. So we really have, over the course of the last, I would say probably 3 years, we've really kind of changed our branding, right? At first it was this high speed, just militaristic, badass, tactical. Everything was tactical, this and that, and urban defender. And it scares people. Even if we're offering civilian courses and you get people that are like, well, geez, I've taken a couple classes, but I'm not that high speed, so I'm going to go someplace else. So we've really made an effort to change that and make it more of a family friendly, type atmosphere here, and change up some of the graphics and such. But that's where the money is, right? And that's what's going to keep this thing afloat.
So was there kind of a pivotal moment for you to think, what, this needs to go out to the masses? Like, was it purely a kind of an investment thing, or was it, the world is changing? Did you have kind of an epiphany moment like that, or was it just kind of looking around?
It's probably both. It's that it's a necessary thing that people need to really get on track and start taking care of themselves. It's a saying, when police are needed, or when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. Right. So, and our tagline used to be respond. You're the first responder, right? When That is the case. I mean, the true first responders aren't the medics and the police. You're the responder, right? So it may take 4 or 5 minutes before a cop can come to your place, or even longer, depending upon where you live. So you have to be able to take care of yourself, and you have to be able to take care of your family first before they arrive. And it's imperative for people to learn some basic fundamentals of how to take care of themselves. Self-defense being one. We teach a lot of the first aid and tactical medical courses. And there was a terrible story. There was a gal, and this was really kind of impactful. There was an older woman. She had her granddaughter at her place. And in fact, we put it in our commercial too, because it had such a profound effect on me. Has her little granddaughter, 7-year-old granddaughter, over at her house, and she's on top of the stool, and she's in front of this wardrobe mirror and playing dress up. And she falls off the stool, hits the mirror, and ends up severing an artery in her leg. And bleeds to death. Grandmother, no idea. You could have closed. There's a closet right there. Improvised tourniquet could have saved her life. And it's for the rest of this woman's life. She's going to be beating herself up. She'll be haunted with that. But these are some basic things.
Right.
I know guys that live out on the lake, out at the Landing or whatever the hell the name is, and they take their kids out boating routinely. What if they get clipped by a propeller? Do you have a tourniquet on your boat? Have you even thought about that? I mean, those are very simple things that people need to be thinking of preparing themselves, and they don't. It's, so that was kind of a pivotal thing at the time, but then also looking at my bank account and realizing that I'm shoving all my money that I had earned from selling my company, my Signal 88, into 88 Tactical. It was like, this doesn't make business sense. Business sense is opening this up to the general public and doing things a little bit differently.
Yeah. Well, I know we need to get you back to your actual job. I had just a couple questions before we finish up, and really it comes down to two things. Number one, where do you want to see 88 Tactical go? What's the future look like for 88 Tactical, and what are you hoping to achieve through it?
We talked a little bit about this. When you create a ceiling, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So I mean, for us, we routinely talk. When I say us, I've got a new partner, Danny White, and then of course I've got Trevor Thrasher, and we have another partner that's coming on board too. We see this as being $1 billion business, right? So currently we're in the process of putting together the architectural layout for a new location. We're wrapping the land up down in Kansas City, Overland Park, Kansas. I see this in the next 3 to 5 years having 25 locations. 25 locations. So after Kansas City is going to be Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And then Minneapolis, Minnesota, and then Columbus, Ohio. We're talking Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas.
Wow.
So I think that this can very easily be $1 billion business.
And then where can people find 88 Tactical online?
We don't have a website yet. We're working on that. I'm kidding. 88tactical.com.
Okay. Yeah, I think
You're
we put that in our
"What the
commercials
fuck?
too.
You don't even have a website yet? No, we've been working on it for 7 years, 8 years now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been great having you on. The information today was just great. I'm going to look forward to listening to this one a couple more times. And we appreciate you letting us be here, just recording. And yeah, what an awesome facility. I've said it before. If you're in the Omaha area, come check out this facility. It's amazing. In the future, you'll be able to check that out in all those different cities. And wow, that's fast too. I knew there was expansion plans, but I didn't realize they were that fast. So that's exciting.
High speed.
Oh yeah,
it's his middle name.
High speed.
So we'll go ahead and let Shea get back to his job. We're gonna just cover our last couple things here. Couple things to cover. We've got our workout of the week as well as our book of the week. So I think Mick's gonna cover both of those today, aren't you?
Yeah. So first of all, the book of the week is I'm actually going to recommend an audio book. David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. I actually just recommended this to Shea. And I've been listening to the audiobook version because they took a really great approach in the audiobook that the guy that kind of co-wrote the book with David, after he reads a chapter, they talk about what went on, maybe some more background on what was going on. But in a nutshell, David Goggins is African American. He's the only man to ever complete Navy SEAL school. Air Force Pararescue School, Army Ranger School. He is a athletic freak of nature. Runs ultra marathons just for the hell of it.
I think he's got the world record for
World
most.
record for pull-ups or something ridiculous. But he had the most fucked up, awful childhood that you can imagine, and despite multiple attempts to try and pull himself forward, kept getting knocked back down. It's a book that is like, it's probably the first audiobook that I can't wait to finish, but I also keep going back and back and back and listening to just some of the just nuggets of wisdom that are in this book. If you are struggling with anything in your life right now, you need to listen to this man's story. It's a story of overcoming physical deficits, emotional deficits, and just absolutely crushing them all, or as he calls it, taking souls. I think he's been featured a lot here recently. It's a book that I've actually heard about for a while, and then finally just got around to getting into it, into my list. And it is probably the most profound book I've read in the last probably 3-4 years. And you know, Josh, you and I both read a lot, and I have referred it to friends, family. I have my own son reading it right now, and it's an absolute game changer for me. David Goggins Can't Hurt Me.
Awesome. I haven't read that one yet. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So I'll go ahead and put that up on the bookshelf. Go ahead and visit thegentlemanbadass.com. We'll have links to, we've got our blog up there. We'll have links to all the books that we put up there, and we'll also have the workout of the week. Mick's also going to explain what the workout of the week is.
All right, so the workout of the week is a workout that we call the Hurricane. And basically it's 1 minute of cardio and 1 minute of a strength exercise. And a strength exercise can include a body weight exercise like a push-up or whatever. Basically, you're going to have 3 categories. The first 2 are 8 minutes long. So it's 4 minutes of running, jumping rope, anything that's a cardiovascular exercise. It can be rowing. It could be any kind of cardio activity. At the 1 minute mark, you stop, drop, and then start lifting weights, push-ups, any kind of strength exercise. You can pretty much pick any random exercise that you wanted. 8 minutes long for the first phase. Then you get a 1 minute break, and you repeat another 8 minutes. And every phase in this, you could pick a different exercise. So for instance, category 1, you might be running on a treadmill, jump off after the 1 minute mark, 1 minute of push-ups. Get back on the treadmill, jump back off after 1 minute, 1 minute of sit-ups. Back on the treadmill for another minute. So now you're at 6 minutes right now. Run for another minute, back off. It could be a minute of dips if I'm just using bodyweight exercises. Back on the treadmill, run for another minute, and maybe a minute of curls if you're going out to the bar that night. And that's your first set. Then you do another 8 minutes. And then the last phase is a 6 minute phase where anything that you've been doing on the cardio circuit. So for instance, if you've been using a treadmill for the cardio, you have 3 1 minute sets left, followed by obviously 3 strength exercises. Those 1 minute sets that you're running in this last 6 minute phase have to be the hardest that you can run. So the idea is that you're already tired, your body's had a full workout, but you mentally need to kind of unfuck yourself for 6 more minutes and just push and squeeze the last bit of juice out. So it's 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 6 minutes, and each of those phases are divided into half cardio, half strength. And literally you can pick any body part and do those. You can randomly choose exercises. So if you're in a gym and you jump off the treadmill, just turn and look around and look for wherever machine is free and just go to it and hammer out as many reps in the 1 minute strength exercise as you can, and then jump back on the treadmill. It is called a hurricane.
Hurricane. So we'll put some specific hurricanes up, just to kind of reiterate what he said. You've got 3 sets, an 8-minute set, an 8-minute set, and a 6-minute set. The first set you're going to do alternating a minute of cardio and a minute of strength. You're going to do that for 4 sets, which totals 8 minutes. You're going to do that a second time, and then on a third time, it's going to be more intense than the first 2 times for that 6-minute set. So we'll put some specific hurricanes up on the website so that if you're not quite sure what you want to do, we'll give you some options. But yeah, go ahead to go to the website, check that out. Sign up for our mailing list while we're there. We're going to put together some reports, some information that we're going to be sending out through our mailing list. And then also subscribe to this podcast, subscribe to us on YouTube. Just search for The Gentleman Badass on YouTube, and we're posting all of these, plus we'll have some other videos up on that YouTube as well. So we appreciate your support. Thank you for tuning in. As always, feel free to email us with your feedback. We want this to be valuable. So if there's anything that we can be doing better, we want to know. If you've got any complaints, feel free to send those through. But like Mick always says,
send them to me.
Yeah, send them to Mick and include your address so he can maybe come to your house.
I will find you.
But once again, Shea, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. This was really enlightening for me, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. So thank you.
Well, guys, it's been an honor. Seriously, absolute honor. Thanks for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
All right, until next time.